Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Put us in a box. Go ahead. That just gives us something to break out of. Because the next generation 2025 GMC Terrain Elevation is raising the standard of what comes standard. As far as expectations go, why meet them when you can shatter them? What we choose to challenge, we challenge completely. We are professional grade. Visit GMC.com to learn more.
From the University of Oregon's Agora Journalism Center, this is the Listeners Podcast. It's been a while, but we're returning with a new season, one that feels especially timely. We're calling it Oregon Speaks, Voices from This Moment. I'm Andrew DeVigel. I teach at the University of Oregon and direct the Agora Journalism Center. I'm also the professor behind Community Voices, a graduate course where students learn to listen deeply and co-create stories with communities. Over the past few weeks, they've been holding space for Oregonians to reflect on what's changing right now in their lives, their work, and their communities. We begin these conversations during the first 100 days of a new presidential administration, a moment that has brought uncertainty, policy shifts, and urgent questions about how we care for one another. The results? A collection of stories sharing their concerns, yes. But they are also about resilience, about mutual aid, and most of all, they're about people showing up for each other. So thanks for coming back to listen. Let's begin. So this next episode was produced by Kaiya Laguardia-Yonamine. So welcome.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. So I want to learn a little bit more. Who do you talk to and why?
Yeah, so I met with Duncan Hwang. He has many roles that he does, but at his day job, he works at APANO, and it's one of the largest Asian American social justice organizations here in the state. But he also just happens to be a local elected official. He works as a Metro counselor for the Southeast and Southwest region of Portland. So yeah, really excited to get to dive into this.
Before we dive in, what stuck with you the most about your conversation with him?
I think it was really interesting to get to dive into all the different community needs that he's seeing, both in the political representative space, but also as an organizer and an advocate for our communities right now. And as we're seeing across our podcast series, there's so many things to respond to.
Yeah, he sits at a very special perch, so I'm really eager to dive in. So why don't we do that? So we just jump right in?
All right.
Here we go.
We can't shy away from politics, and we have to lean in. You have to be engaged in that community. You have to continue to learn and grow. For so many of our projects, we would have a decade of no's until we got to that yes. But you get to that yes through intentional organizing and power building.
That was Duncan Hwang, a local organizer and current elected official serving on the Metro Council. He and I have been in similar spaces over the years, but Duncan is what I would consider an invested member in the APANO community, as in he was there when it began.
Yeah, I started with APANO in 2013, so 12 years at the organization. And yeah, when we first started, we had maybe 3 staff, and we were just, really focused on, grassroots organizing, advocacy, and civic engagement, kind of registering voters and getting them out to vote. So that was kind of our bread and butter. But over, the course of a couple of years, we just noticed obvious needs for specifically the Asian American community that weren't, getting fulfilled. So I think we started to, continue to do that organizing and advocacy, but also start working more on the implementation side as well.
In full disclosure, at the time of this recording, I also work at APANO on the election side of things. So we know each other's work pretty well. I was in the youth group back in the day and have only been in official staff for about a year now. But for Duncan,
It's been about a decade. So, yeah.
2013.
Yeah.
I can't think about how that was far away. That doesn't sound far away to me. But
Well, I think a year in a nonprofit is like 3 years anywhere else. Like time just like flies.
the organization has gone through quite a few changes over the years, now mainly serving Asian and Asian American communities and offering different services throughout Oregon. They now have a 501c3, their normal programs, and a separate 501c4 called APANO Action Fund, which works directly with candidates and campaigns to win elections.
We have this like virtuous cycle where I think the policy and advocacy team goes out and wins, policy campaigns, gets folks elected to office that represent us, and then it'll come to the C3 side and my side for implementation of like how do we actually then build that thing that the community has been asking for. So it's kind of off this big picture policy of working directly with community members.
Meanwhile, Duncan's role at Metro combines a lot of similar priorities and issues seen at his day job. For those who don't know, the council is much more than just a regional government in the Portland metro area. They run the Oregon Zoo, the Convention Center, the Expo Center, and manage cross-county work like transit lines, all the waste management, and now some housing projects.
I wasn't really thinking about running for public office, but my predecessor on the council had to retire for medical reasons. So they reached out and asked if I would, step in. So that's kind of like how I ended up there. It's just really great to have that kind of like supportive workplace where actually that's part of the mission is to grow that kind of leadership. So we see that, in the legislature and locally from our board and members of, folks stepping into leadership, which is exactly what we want to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's cool to see people being able to build up their tools and then go use them out into the elected offices. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So something that I was really interested in is your origin story with organizing in the first place. So if there's a really big moment or memory that stood out to you that kind of launched you on this path, lay it out for me. What happened? Where were you?
If we're talking about an origin story, I want to go a little further back.
Go for it.
Yeah. So my parents are immigrants. They came over from Taiwan, and we ended up in Upper Michigan. It's like tiny little town. And my mom opened the first Chinese restaurant in the whole like that part of the state, basically. So that's kind of my background was like, we were this immigrant family in the middle of nowhere. So I don't think I was like particularly civically involved. But then when I went to college, I went to the University of Michigan. Then that's when I really kind of fell into organizing. So I worked throughout college as a canvasser. So I knocked on a lot of doors, working on various environmental causes. And then after college, I worked as an organizer for the National Youth Vote Coalition and did like voter registration and turnout. So that's kind of like how I got into it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where was the moment that like it clicked for you that you want to do organizing kind of stuff within that? Was that in college, is that what you're saying? Or?
I think it really depends on your definition of organizing, right? And there's different types of organizing. Civic engagement really only gets you so far. I think you really do need to step into, honestly, the political realm sometimes to really get the change that you want to see. You can organize people and you can also organize money. We have all these like community dreams, community visions, and if they don't get funded, they just sit there on the shelf, right? Like these are the things that our community needs. So how do we organize the resources and capital to make sure they happen? I spend a lot of my time now thinking about like organizing kind of the resources that we need. So how do we get investment for community centers and affordable housing and small businesses and not like big box stores. So I think a lot of it is like, how do we organize the people and then how do we organize the resources? That's kind of been my evolution. But at the center of it, it's just, what does the community need and how are we kind of like building that collective power together. I don't think I could just do like any of one of those things because they're also kind of interconnected. But I would say that all came together really throughout my time at APANO.
So now that you're back in the organizing world, what is it like to shift between working as an organizer and then as an elected official like at the same time? Fighting for different things and resources. Like what comes up for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting culture shift. So like a couple days a week, I'm an advocate, and a couple days a week, I have to say no to be advocates, right? Or like not no necessarily, but just be like, this is what we got, like resource-wise, or this is what we're constrained to do. So that's like a weekly culture shift. Sometimes we are in this like Portland progressive bubble where we talk to our friends. But it's really valuable to have that perspective of like, actually, this is what someone in Clackamas County thinks, or this is what, this industry thinks. Sometimes we just got to get out of our bubbles. I think that's a thing that we have to like, be honest about, is just like, this is what's causing that polarization because we're not having those conversations. But at the same time, I think it's really important to stick to your values, right? Like it's okay to disagree, but yeah, I think, staying true to your values is just, really, really critical. So yeah, I think what you see is what you get. I'd rather, stick to my values than, compromise them a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought up the different like almost like echo chambers that some people can get into in terms of their political just lifestyles when it comes to the first 100 days.
Yeah. I think coalition building is now more important than ever, especially, sometimes with different interest groups. There's some power to be like, actually, we might not agree on everything, but we agree on this, and we have to like speak up about that. When we broaden that tent and do some coalition building, I think that's when we can be most impactful.
You were saying organizing with people and organizing with capital and that kind of thing. I feel like in our space, like everything is politicized. Is kind of how we see things. Right. All the different systemic oppressions that we're seeing currently impacting our communities are coming from policies and from things that people put in place that said that this is how things need to be, So it's interesting how you brought all of that connected into each other. Yeah,
I think people are recognizing more and more that everything is political. And, if you can say, I don't want to get involved in politics, that is a place of privilege, right? It's like you feel like, no matter who is in charge, that you will be okay. And that's not the case for our community. Like, it really does matter. And we're seeing and feeling that.
You're kind of touching on like things are getting impacted in our communities. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering if you could tell us what has changed for you. That's a huge one, but
gosh, so much. Maybe I'll go top down. I think on the local government level, the changes at the federal level are huge. It really does impact our funding for transit, highway and other transportation investments, bridges, housing. It makes it really hard to do planning and kind of meet the same service levels. And that actually just, flows to nonprofit and to communities as well. It's just like there's less resources. So some of our partners lost, 20-40% of their budget kind of overnight. It's really hard to do business, just given the uncertainty around, tariffs or other regulatory changes. Like, we're building affordable housing space, but we don't know how much wood or steel and materials like that are going to cost. And that could change overnight. I think on an individual level, we're just, hearing a lot about enforcement fear, particularly around ICE. I think people are afraid to go into public spaces, go to school or church. I think that's all kind of being impacted. Back in the first Trump administration at APANO, I actually saw a whole bunch of federal raids because the administration was clamping down on the Chinese herbal shops along 82nd because they were selling kind of controlled animal parts as part of herbal remedies. So there was like these militarized responses of like you would send in a SWAT team to like basically arrest like a community elder. And I think stuff like that is still happening and top of mind. So yeah, I think the community is being impacted so many different ways. And it's hard to keep track of because, there's a new executive order or something like that every day. Like yesterday it was an executive order on nonprofits and then an executive order on transportation funding for cities that are sanctuary cities. So I think it's just been really challenging to weed through all that and, what's impactful and what's not and what do you have to change, which is basically like everything.
And when you bring up these different examples, I don't know, personally, what kind of emotions come up for you? Like, is there fear? Is there frustration? Is there hope? Like, what kind of things surface for you when you're reflecting on this?
Gosh, all of those. I would just, first say that we're getting, worn down, and that's an intentional strategy. Like, even if they can't shut everything off, like in terms of funding or whatever, like just that delay and uncertainty is doing damage. Like, that's the whole strategy, like, is to flood the zone with all this stuff so you can't respond to everything. So you really got to be strategic in what you're picking and responding to. And I think people are just tired. It's been a long 8 years, right? Like, we spent 4 years in the first Trump administration and then 4 years in the pandemic. I think people are pretty exhausted. But at the same time, I think what gives me hope is, like, we've been through the ringer, our organization, our community, and we're still here and we're still working. I think everyone's just more experienced and know how to be adaptive and flexible.
I think we're seeing these themes around like community strength, coalition building, networking, all those kind of things. But another thing that kind of showed up is like mutual aid and supporting each other.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, where are you seeing mutual aid or this kind of support show up? If you're seeing that show up in different places with the context of all this shifting in these times.
Yeah. I think it's happening pretty much everywhere. Realms like childcare. Folks are looking out for each other's kids. I think you see that in like food security, especially like, taking advantage of property and community gardens and things like that. A lot of spaces with artists, I think, have come together. I always think about it through this lens of like the traditional nonprofit mindset or government mindset of like, how is this supported? How is this funded? But I'm just amazed at what people are willing to do when they just come together and do that thing. That garden next to our office?
Yeah.
Like that was like the neighbors came together and did that. Like, there was no outside money attached to that.
Really?
Yeah.
Quick side note, the J District, where APANO's office is located, is in the heart of Southeast Portland along 82nd Avenue. This area is known for its legacy of Asian small businesses, restaurants, and huge community gatherings, like the annual J District Night Market. Okay, back to Duncan.
I was actually doing a tour of the J District last year, and there was like an encampment there, and it caught on fire during the tour. So we had to stop the tour because there was so much smoke. But after that, the neighborhood came together and put in this like small community garden, like on their own. Like, people just came together to do it, to like kind of like, reclaim that space into something that the community can enjoy and use.
Wow, see, people just rolled up their sleeves and got it done right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes that needs to happen.
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing is like folks are like, actually, the government is busy or, they're slow and efficient. So we got to take care of ourselves. And sometimes you can't rely on you can't rely on the government to do everything we should be doing sometimes.
You and I have talked in the past about these recurring themes that we're seeing in our everyday work. And one of them was like what you're saying, coalition building and meeting people you hadn't met before and doing kind of similar values and work, but also the value of like trust during these times / lack of trust in a lot of spaces right now. So one of my questions is like, what role does trust kind of play in your community itself? And how is that trust being impacted as well?
Yeah. Well, I think trust is everything. Like, if you try to rush a process because you don't have trust, it's going to fail. I mean, especially here in the Portland metro region, we've seen that over and over again. When we started in the J District in East Portland, we did that big community visioning process. It was, 5 languages. And I think the community really like laid out a vision for the district. And the trust building piece of it, it was just like for the next 12 years, we've been chipping away at that vision. And the first was like, Fortress of 82nd. It was like a community garden. It was the J District Night Market. It was safety improvements on the road. It was new transit lines. That vision was there, but you earn trust by like implementing that vision. You earn trust by delivering on those promises. People want to see action. So in some spaces in Portland, we over-engage the community because we don't want to do the actual thing. sometimes we just got to like make that decision, roll up our sleeves and do a thing. And that's what builds trust. So I think no one wants to just keep talking in circles. When you vote for something, we need to deliver on that.
I would love to kind of shift this into more of like the hope, the kind of moving forward in the time that we're in. So if you have a moment recently where you saw some kind of like powerful connection, can you give us an example of that?
One example might be, so at Metro, Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah County each kind of have their own system in response to the homelessness crisis. I think the challenge with that is some counties are doing pretty well, like Clackamas County, but their compassion ended at the Clackamas County border. They're like, if you live in Multnomah County, not our problem. You might be in the street, but that's not my problem. But I think what we're seeing, which has actually been really kind of amazing, is like folks are coming to the table and talking and like thinking about the future of the system and actually expanding how far their compassion extends. So I think that's been a really positive development. But I think it really took like these first 100 days, just tightening of resources, like all of that to be like, actually, we do need to work together to figure this out. Like we can't just go back to our corners. In this first 100 days, it's like things are changing pretty rapidly and we need to create kind of a new framework for how we go forward. I think people are just kind of wrestling with that of like, how do you take limited resources and try to do the most good? And that means giving up a little bit of my own power, my own influence for the greater good, which is a hard conversation, right? But
yeah,
necessary.
It's like you have your constituents, but then you also have the neighboring ones.
Yeah,
all
right.
That kind
exactly.
of thing.
Yeah.
This is going to sound insensitive.
Okay.
Why do this? Like, why are you? I know, right? Like, but seriously, like, honestly, for anyone, but I feel like for people who have not seen themselves as like being a person in these kind of advocacy spaces or like are new to it, what keeps you going specifically?
Yeah. I talked about in my origin story, my mom had a Chinese restaurant and, I would help out sometimes. So I'd like bus tables or, make some dumplings or whatever. But you can see that happening today. Like if you go up and down in the neighborhood on 82nd, like you see that same scene playing out. And it's like, how do we make sure, those kids have the same opportunities to do what they want? For all the, challenges, I really do enjoy my work. I mean, I think having, that kind of opportunity for young folks, in those shops and restaurants to chart their own path is, I think that's really motivating for me.
Yeah, the restaurant kid culture.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our parents work so hard when you have a restaurant. And it's like they're doing that so you can have the opportunity to do what you want. And, like when I was in college, my mom wanted me to be a doctor, of course. But I was like, no, I'm going to do this political science thing. And they're like, why? Like, we can't even vote for you. Like, we're not citizens. So, like, why would you do that? But, like, now that I'm an elected official, they're like, oh, okay, we get it. Good job. But it took a lot for them to, like, get there. Like, everyone should do and live where they want and have those choices out of them. Because I think what we see is, like, your opportunities and those doors close. So it's like, how do we create that sense of agency?
Yeah, the self-autonomy to choose how you do things. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
What is a resilient community in your vision?
Yeah, we are hoping on our way to making the J District the most climate resilient, affordable, and transit-rich part of town. So I think those are like the physical improvements. We have great transit. We have a community resilience hub where folks can go during an emergency. We're doing, home weatherization projects. We're doing affordable housing. Those are examples of like physical resilience. I think there's also like the services part, like what kind of programs are being offered. Like we have, the food pantry. So I think that's all part of resilience. And then I think that representation piece is resilience. In this day and age, for the first time, we have 2 Asian American city councilors. The 82nd Avenue corridor is represented by Senator Pham, Representative Thuy Tran, Representative Hua Nguyen. And then, I'm on the Metro Council. It's really hard to do something that'll hurt the community in terms of a big project because of that political representation. So that's part of a resilient community. It's like, are your people in those decision-making tables? So, yeah, I think resiliency means a lot. It's like, ability to affect change, physical improvements, and then like the social wraparound services that, if you're having a tough time, like someone is there to help you. So
yeah. And to bring back what you were saying earlier about like self-autonomy and like being able to choose how you're going to live your life in that space. Those kind of safety barriers, I guess, Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Shout out Samir and Tiffany, 2 Asian American city councilors. Let's go.
That's right. Yeah.
Sort of a follow-up to that, but if you were to kind of imagine these resilient communities, what do you think needs to happen to kind of make those visions possible?
I would invest in the people and the connections that they have, because that's really what organizing is, right? It's like, how do we come together to tackle our shared problems? If you don't have kind of that network and relationships and trust, like you're not going to tackle your shared problems. You're going to go into the scarcity mindset where you're competing against each other. So
moving into these calls to action, let's get people
fired
up. Very simple question. What should we do?
I think the most important thing, honestly, is to not give up. I think we're seeing a lot of people are just like, all this is beyond me. I can just watch Netflix. And I think that's kind of like what some powers that be are hoping for, is that they've flooded the zone and you'll just like turn it off and not pay attention. Of course, you could say like donate to your favorite nonprofit or vote, but I really think it's actually keep paying attention and taking action, and then take care of yourself. You're not good to anyone if you're sick or burnt out. I think this is also part of that strategy. It's like, we're going to make things really tough for these organizations and these organizers and these communities, so they'll just get burnt out and tired and they'll give up. Yeah, we just can't give into that. So, yeah, I used to be like, self-care. But now it's like, actually, that is an act of resistance and you got to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Used to feel like you could just burn through, and now it's, workload's getting a little.
Yeah, I'm just like, what is this self-care? Is it being weaponized? But like, what is that like thoughtful, like rest, self-care mean, and how do we foster that as a workplace and as a society?
It feels like in our work, local elections are really central to a lot of what we do. And so, with so much happening on the federal level, it's almost like we've had to look inward to our neighborhoods and the local spaces to make that ripple effect. So with so much quote unquote noise going on the national level, would you be able to speak to how local leadership can also change things?
Yeah, I think, for the most part, all politics is local. Like, people really respond to what happens, on their street, what they're paying at the grocery store. A lot of that is tied to local politics, and that's where you can make the most difference, right? Like, I think we see a lot of gridlock or, whatever at the federal level, a lot of chaos, but I think people, especially here, are able to really influence and determine, where their neighborhood and their community is headed. So, yeah, I would just encourage everyone to really pay attention to what's happening on the local scene, because that's where you can make the most difference, and you can reach out to someone and have them on your podcast.
One of the last questions I have for you, depending on what communities you have in mind or that you're bringing into the space, what is a message that you would like to give to your community right now?
What would I tell the community right now? I think we've been here before and that we've been through worse, and that's going to be okay. But I think when we organize, we win.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Mic drop right there then.
Yeah,
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is Kaiya Laguardia-Yonamine of the University of Oregon. Thanks for listening.
That's it for this episode of the Listeners Podcast, Oregon Speaks. Thanks so much for listening and for making space for these voices. This season of Listeners is produced by graduate students in the Community Voices course at the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication. If you appreciated what you heard, we'd love for you to share it with someone in your own community. And if this kind of community-based storytelling speaks to you, if you're curious about how to create podcasts that builds trust and sparks dialogue, we've got something for you. The University of Oregon now offers a community podcasting micro-credential, a flexible, hands-on program designed for anyone looking to amplify local voices through audio storytelling. Whether you're new to podcasting or looking to take your work further, this might be the next step. You can learn more about this program with a link in our show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, keep on listening.